regarding privacy management program. I will turn it over to staff to introduce themselves and run us through the topic.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council and staff. Thank you for having us today. My name is Chetan Kaur, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Information and Privacy Supervisor at the district and also Deputy Corporate Officer. And I'm joined here by our Director of Corporate Administration and Corporate Officer, Melissa von Ploto. And I'm here to present the newly developed privacy management program for the district and the proposed amendments to the Freedom of Information bylaw. So the agenda for today, I'll start with discussing some background information regarding the bylaw and the privacy protocols. And then I will follow up discussing information regarding the ministerial direction that triggered the development of PMP and the update to the bylaw. After that, I will touch on the 6 pillars that we developed for the district's PMP privacy management program framework. Further, I will discuss the alignment of the district's PMP framework with the ministerial direction. And then I will touch on the proposed amendments to the FOI bylaw and the next steps. So talking about the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, it was enacted in 1996 in British Columbia. And there are 2 main objectives of this act. One is protection of privacy, and second, ensuring that public has access to information in custody and control of the district. Not just district, but all public bodies in BC. So following up on the enactment of the act, after 1996, district developed, after thorough investigation, research, and training, district developed the FOI bylaw, also known as Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy bylaw, and the policy associated with this bylaw. Now, this policy had 2 important elements. One was there were some other elements as well, but these 2 are the ones that we will touch on in detail. That's the privacy impact assessment for significant programs only, and privacy breach and complaints investigation process. We also conducted privacy awareness initiatives for staff that included new and existing staff training, orientation sessions, circulating of information material, and thereon. Discussing about the information regarding the ministerial direction. So the Ministry of Citizen Services is responsible for the act. It is a requirement under the act that ministry appoints a special committee of the Legislative Assembly once every 6 years. And once this committee is appointed, this committee has to submit a report within 1 year of their date of appointment. And this report is submitted after comprehensive review, maybe public engagement, or consultation with other public bodies. So likewise, there was a stakeholder engagement conducted within the timeframe of 2018 to 2021. And there were 2 main changes that came to the legislation. First was amendment to the main legislation to FOIPA, and then ministerial direction for PMP, the Privacy Management Program. In response to the ministerial direction and changes to the legislation, district worked on developing its own privacy management framework, which we are calling Privacy Management Program. And this Privacy Management Program has 6 main components. There were some elements of this framework that already existed, and we had to update those elements. And there were some which we had to develop from scratch. So I will talk about these elements in details in the next few slides. The first one I would like to discuss is the privacy management policy. So this policy rescinds the earlier FOI and privacy policy that we had. And this policy applies to staff, volunteers, elected officials, service providers, and contractors. And this policy provides guidelines about handling of personal information and protection of personal information at the district. So the PI stands for personal information in the diagram above. So the policy talks about collection, use, disclosure of personal information, safeguarding of personal information. It provides guidelines about it. Access and correction of personal information. Under the legislation, individual can request correction of their personal information. Similarly, it also talks about retention and disposal of personal information, responsible use of information and information technology, talks about education and awareness initiatives at the district, privacy impact assessments, information sharing agreements for regular information sharing with other parties, assessments, compliance reviews, and audit requirements, and most importantly, privacy breach management and protocols. Similar to the policy, we also have a bylaw. The bylaw designates the privacy head and privacy coordinator for the purpose of the act, and it's a requirement under the legislation. The bylaw also outlines responsibility of the privacy head and the designate. So privacy head at the district make all privacy related decisions, and they can designate their responsibilities to another official. The bylaw also set fees required to be paid under Section 75 of FOIPA. I will talk about the fees in detail when I discuss the proposed amendments for the FOI bylaw. Further, we also worked on developing mandatory and on-demand training for staff and council. The mandatory training is divided into 3 modules. A special thanks to our IT team. Our IT application support specialist helped in designing these modules. So we made sure that these training modules are accessible and inclusive. We used immersive reader function. We used high contrast color scheme. We used plain and concise language. And this training material is also available on council learning and development page. And once you access this training, you will notice we have tried our best to make it very interactive. Similarly, if I talk about on-demand training for staff and council, we conduct trainings for new staff. We conduct orientation for them, and then other training material as needed. As we get updates or we get questions from staff, we continue circulating the training material. In addition to the on-demand and online training material, we also developed information material for staff and council. Again, to be inclusive and to be accessible to all, we designed 3 different kinds of information materials to cater needs of different staff, to cater different needs of staff. So there are 3 different kinds of materials, and we circulated it among council and staff as well. One is the privacy tip sheet, which is for new employees. Once staff complete their mandatory training, once staff and council complete their mandatory training, they will be able to download the privacy tip sheet. We also developed customer privacy reminders for customer-facing staff, something that they can have handy on their desk. And we tried our best to use infographics so that it's very catchy and simple to understand. We also developed a detailed information material for all district staff. This 3rd type of information material has more information in it. And the approach was that once staff is familiar with all the basic information, they should have access to more detailed information. And we are always available to answer their questions. And again, huge thanks to our comms team and our digital and graphics technician. They helped us to make sure that we use good functions, good approaches for making this material accessible. Again, we used high contrast color scheme, used plain and concise language, used infographics, and we created information in different versions. Further, I would like to discuss how these 6 pillars align with the ministerial direction that was issued by the ministry. So on the left, you will notice these are the components which were requirement under the ministerial direction. And on the right are the elements developed or updated by the district to align district's PMB components with the ministerial direction. So first requirement under the ministerial direction was that the privacy head should designate an individual as a point of contact for privacy-related matters, supporting the development, implementation, and maintenance of privacy policies and procedures, and supporting the public body's compliance with FOIPA. To align with this component of the ministerial direction, we updated our FOI bylaw, and we are proposing an update to our FOI bylaw, and we developed our privacy management policy that touches on who is responsible for what and who to contact. And second element of the ministerial direction was to develop a process for completing and documenting PIAs, privacy impact assessments. So these privacy impact assessments are mandatory for all district initiatives that collect or use personal information. In order to satisfy this component, we developed PI process and guidelines. So the FOI policy earlier had some guidelines for PIs, but we created additional procedures to have detailed information about who is responsible for what and how they can complete the PI. We also developed the PI guiding document, which is a detailed information material. It was also attached to the agenda, and it talks about how to complete the PI. The privacy management policy also talks about responsibilities and requirements in association to the PIs. Further, the ministerial direction also required development of process for responding to privacy complaints and privacy breaches. Earlier, it was not mandatory to report all privacy complaints and breaches, but now it's mandatory under the legislation to respond to all privacy complaints and breaches reported to the OIPC if the breach can cause significant harm, and reported to the affected parties as well. In order to satisfy this requirement, district developed privacy management policy. Again, it provides guidelines about what are the steps associated with the investigation and reporting of privacy complaints and privacy breaches. And further, we also developed procedures associated in relation to the policy, which further provide details on what are the steps involved in detail. Next element for the ministerial direction was to develop material for privacy awareness and education activities. For that, as I discussed earlier, district developed printed educational material, online training, in-person privacy training, and our efforts don't just end here. We will continue developing more material in future as based on the feedback received from staff and or changes to the legislation. Next component of the ministerial direction that I would like to discuss is privacy policies and any documented privacy processes or practices for employees and where applicable for public. So the privacy management policy will be available on SharePoint for our staff, and it will also be available on CivicWeb for our public. The ministerial direction also required to ensure that service providers are informed of the privacy obligations. To satisfy this requirement, we have developed a template for information sharing agreements. Information sharing agreements are mostly used for regular sharing of information with other parties. And our awareness initiatives across all departments is a continued process. We'll continue educating all our departments, ensuring that we answer all their questions and we will make sure that they are aware of all the privacy protocols so that they can enlighten our service providers of the required privacy obligations as they come in contact. Lastly, the ministerial direction also required a process for regularly monitoring the PMP and update it as required. The privacy management policy clearly outlines that the privacy head and the privacy coordinator for the District of Squamish will be responsible to ensure that the PMP is up to date and is regularly monitored. Further, we are also proposing amendment to the FOI bylaw. These are the proposed amendments just to make sure that we clearly outline the responsibilities and all the requirements of FOIPA. So there are some sections for which we are proposing the amendments. Firstly, we are proposing adding a definition for the applicant. Earlier, the FOI bylaw had earlier the FOI bylaw had definition for commercial applicant, but it didn't have the definition for an applicant, just to differentiate how they are different from each other. So we are adding definition for an applicant. We are also proposing to update information for designation of the privacy head and the privacy coordinator. We are replacing some text to add to establish powers of the head. It outlines responsibilities of the privacy head that can be delegated as required. Lastly, we are also proposing some wording to establish fees for commercial applicants. The fees were already there. There was just no wording to establish that fees that we charge commercial applicants based on our fees and charges bylaw. So we are proposing to add some wording for clarification. So next steps to the PMP, and after we receive approval for the FOI bylaw, we will roll out the mandatory privacy training for staff and council. We will send the messaging out to all staff, and we'll make required changes to all district practices for compliance with the bylaw and with the policy, which further aligns with FOIPA. So staff's recommendation today is that council receive the privacy management program as presented at the meeting today, and direct staff to include the District of Squamish Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy bylaw, the amendment bylaw 3114/2024 on the September 16, 2025 regular business meeting agenda for consideration for first readings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions on what we've heard or what was included in your package? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, a lot of great work here and some actually challenging things. One thing I wanted to dig into a little bit, there's some reference or changes around commercial applicants, I guess, to the process. But if I understand this, this is really talking about human being individual privacy information. A business may be inquiring for some reason, but we're not talking about trade secrets or sort of business privacy or any of that. This is really focused on individual sort of citizens. Is that accurate? Or is there a commercial aspect and trade secrets and all of that bundled in with this? That sort of seems to me, I got the sense that that's a separate topic, but.
Thank you for your question through the chair. Yeah, so the definition for the applicant and commercial applicant only comes in use when we are charging them fee for FOI request. So anyone who operates for profit, so for commercial activities, they will be categorized as commercial applicants. Therefore, they will be charged fee pursuant to our fees and charges bylaw. Similarly, any other members of public other than commercial applicants will fall under the category of applicants, and they will be charged fees set under the act under FOIPA.
Thank you. But for clarity, though, this isn't the sort of area where we contemplate how we manage trade secrets or commercial interests and all that sort of thing. That's sort of a separate topic.
That's right. That's a separate topic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then the other piece, and this was a bit trickier for me, for something like managing property tax invoices or property tax folios and so on, all of this kind of makes sense. I can wrap my head around it. But with our public hearing processes or sort of our development showcase things where people are giving all kinds of forms and they're required to give their neighborhood or so on, and increasingly things like your handwriting or in a an email, the way you use punctuation or capitalization or your word choices, all those are starting to become personally identifying. So is the idea with all of those that we actually examine those processes and actually accept less or share less, which would be less transparent? Or is it that we just maybe need to be very mindful and clear that like everyone gets to see that, and that's the sort of understanding you have to come in if you want to interact with this process? That's the way it is. It is because that sort of those the public hearing process and so on are very much not private. Very much you have to have the expectation of public. And so is that kind of the understanding, or are we expected to actually make these processes more private?
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, we continuously audit our practices, and because the responsibility to conduct public hearings falls within our department. So we regularly audit our practices to make sure that we are not collecting any information that's not required for the district process or for the process of public hearing. The statement that I often use when I'm asked similar question is that please make sure to share right information with the right person for the right use. So it all falls within that statement, just making sure that we're collecting information for the right purpose, using it for the right purpose, and of course, like safeguarding it. So in order to answer your question, we audit our practices on regular basis to make sure that we comply with the privacy protocols. Do you like to add something?
Can I add to that you'll notice on most of our forms and on most of our emails, there is information about who to contact if there are questions that come up related to privacy. And we try as often as possible to be as explicit on their forms that as to the reason we're collecting that information. So we have really increased our level of transparency around that in recent years. And to speak to the public hearing component, I'm sure there are areas where we could improve. And one of those changes that we've made in recent years is we used to request people state their address. And we really have walked that back and are encouraging people to state their neighborhood. We could look at that further because anyone can speak at a public hearing, and whether or not they live in a certain neighborhood isn't really applicable. So we could look at a process change around that.
Yeah, and maybe this is a question for the provincial government rather than you, but I'm wondering if you have a sense. I guess part of me reading through all this kind of feels like the Office of the Privacy Commissioner is very focused on privacy and is pushing everything from that lens. And if I just sort of read their stuff, I would think like, whoa, we've really got to cut out a lot of what we're doing in our public hearing process. But from a local government and I guess the Ministry of Municipal Affairs perspective, all that transparency, they seem to push us the other way. And I guess, should we infer anything from the province? Like, is the province expecting us to be sort of less transparent in our public hearings or more, or they're like, is there any sort of implicit direction from the province on pushing one way or the other?
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, the best practices and the guidelines from the province outlines that the public bodies should be transparent as much as they can, but they need to make sure that they still follow the exceptions outlined in the act. So we always have to be mindful of the exceptions, but we are required to be as much transparent as we can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for the work on this. I can see it's clearly been a long haul to put all this together, the ministerial order from several years ago. And couple things. I want to clearly understand what council is approving versus what it's receiving. Do I understand correctly? We approve the bylaw, but we effectively receive the procedures, meaning the procedures and the policy are under staff's authority. The bylaw and the wording of the bylaw is what we approve at the next council meeting if we so choose to go that way. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you for that question.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's important that we are clear on what we're approving and what we're and what staff's under control, what's under staff's jurisdiction. It's good. One thing that's not really clear to me is the applicant versus commercial applicant. Okay, so both applicant and a commercial applicant will need to pay fees. The applicant pays fees based on, you said FOIPA. The commercial applicant pays fees according to our fees and charges bylaw. Why the distinction?
Thank you for that question. That's outlined in the legislation. That's inbuilt in the legislation. My understanding is that's because the commercial applicants are running on the objective of making profit, and so they are charged the commercial applicant fee. There is no clear direction in the act or in its policies on why it differentiates on the fee, but it states different fee for commercial applicants and applicants. So for commercial applicants, we charge the actual fee that we bear as public body, and for applicants, for all other members of public, we charge the fee that's outlined, which is slightly lower, and outlined in our in FOIPA. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't able to find how much the fees are charged in FOIPA. I'll look at that.
There is also a schedule added to the proposed, redlined FOI bylaw,
Which is the fee.
which is the fee, and that's the fee under the act under FOIPA.
Oh, I thought that was our
Fees and charges.
fees and charges.
Sorry for the confusion. No, that's the fee schedule from FOIPA.
And that's the one that outlines like 75 cents for a photocopy.
Yes, that's the
Schedule
outline.
Schedule of maximum fees.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I see. That's why item 2. Okay. So my question, one of my concerns in this area are outlined in the FOIPA, one of the policies from the BC government in the legislation. Fees are not to be a barrier to access to information. And I can imagine a government body maybe doesn't want to expose something, so they say, okay, the fee for that's going to be really high, right? I don't actually want to give you that document, so the fee is going to be really high. What protections do the public have that we or no other government is going to do that? How do we put in some protection?
Thank you. Thank you for that question through the chair. So whenever we provide applicant, so applicant is the person who submits an FOI request, as I mentioned earlier. So whenever the applicant, a regular applicant or a commercial applicant, when we reach out to them regarding the fee, we also provide them information about the exceptions to the fee under the legislation. So there are few considerations under which a fee can be exempted. They can reach out to the privacy head and explain the reason for requesting that information. And if that reason falls within those considerations outlined in the act, we can exempt the fee. Yeah, but we try to be very transparent in our process, and we try our best to provide them with the information and lessen the cost as well.
So what would be a typical yeah,
Sorry, can I add to that? That too, when we provide an estimate, we break it down on an estimate of the number of staff hours that would be required to process the documents. And then the applicant is only, and then we track that, and the applicant is only charged what we actually incur,
Mhm.
right? So we do provide an estimate, but then we're very transparent about how many hours we as a staff team incurred. And that's what they're charged for. And it's based off of cost recovery. So we try our best to be
Transparent and diligent about our process.
exactly. Yeah.
so how much are we talking? Are we talking tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars? What's the range that we're talking about so that I can have a clearer understanding of like how this tool might or might not be used?
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, that will totally depend on the nature of the FOI request submitted. So there are generally requests which are very broad. We try and reach out to the applicant and try and narrow down the request. And then again, then it depends if it's a regular applicant or a commercial applicant. Further, it depends on how many pages are in the response package. To be noted, if the fee is less than $10, we don't charge them any fee. And first 3 hours are free under the Act. So it totally depends on different factors.
Absolutely understand. So a community member approached me. They had applied for a Freedom of Information request for something that I would have imagined would have been fairly straightforward, and the cost was quite high, surprising to them, and frankly surprising to me. But I might not know how much staff time is required behind the scenes. So how can we communicate to the community a reasonable expectation for how much this is going to Freedom of Information requests might cost, and why that charge is there?
Thank you for your question. I think it's important, and we do that on regular basis. Whenever I receive a request, now I've worked in this field for so long that I can tell how much staff time might be involved in the request. So if I think the request is too broad, I usually call the applicant because it's the easiest way to get in touch with them and find out what they're actually looking for. So it's hard to say what can we communicate to the public in order to make sure that they're not paying for something that they don't need. But we have some information available on the district website, on the FOI page, where we explain why it's important to narrow down the request, to make sure they're only requesting information that they really need. And they can shorten the timeline. So we have all those things listed on the district website.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to leave it there for now.
Yep, thank you. Go to Councillor Anderson, then Pettingill.
A question somewhat related to Councillor Hamilton's area of interest, and that is the commercial applicant. A property owner engaged in dealings with the district, which may prompt an application under the Freedom of Information Act. That property may be a registered company. The interest involved may in fact be commercial. The rights to use the property, issues affecting the value of the property. Is that a commercial applicant, that property owner?
Thank you for your question. No, that won't be considered as a commercial applicant. It will be based on, so that will be determined based on how they submit the request and what information they provide. If they're submitting information as a property owner, then they are not considered as a commercial applicant.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, 2 things. So I'll start with the first one. How often, I guess, there's the one case where FOIPA is very relevant. And my understanding is we have a huge burden. So the flip side, I guess, of my colleague's question is, you know, if someone files 1,000 FOI requests to us, then so there has to be that balance there. But if we, you know, if there's a document and it's got all kinds of identifying information and so on, I understand we can't just proactively release it, and it needs some analysis and proper redaction and so on. And so that the FOIPA process makes sense. How often, or does it, or what's the process for a document where there actually isn't any personal identifying information, but we just haven't had the capacity or whatever to put it up on our website and so on? And so it's not really a private document. Does that fall into the FOIPA process? Does that sort of get, you know, if I want that thing, or maybe I just can't find it on the search, like is it attached an agenda from 3 years ago, it's on the website. I'm guessing maybe sometimes that's the nature of a FOIPA request. It's actually already a public document. How does that sort of thing get resolved?
Thank you for a question. That happens from time to time where a member of public, commercial or regular applicant reach out to us and they request information which is a public document. We do clarify to them that they don't require an FOI request for that, but we try our level best to make sure that they have a link available or they have access to that information. Either we provide them with a copy of the record right away, or we provide them with an online link from where they can access the information.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess my other question, and maybe it's a bit to my colleagues as well, but in this, you know, for example, there might be an opportunity for us to provide some direction. Like I can think of a developer showcase and the developer is required to hold a meeting sometimes as part of our processes, collect information. It seems that there's some discretion there. And if we're really, really prioritizing privacy, we might say, like, don't submit those to us or that sort of thing. Or the council direction might be like, no, we really want to encourage that. We just want to make it very explicit that this will become public and identifying. And so when or do you need some council direction and sort of the spectrum or where there's a choice of where we want to land?
Thank you for that question, through the chair. So for that, we wouldn't require council direction, but good thing is because privacy impact assessments, which are step-by-step security assessment for processes, is required for all district processes that collect personal information. Under that, there is currently a privacy impact assessment in process for all these public engagement and showcases that are conducted.
So can I take from that then the understanding or our direction at this point is, I think given everything I've heard, to be as transparent, share as much of who's providing this feedback and so on, as much as we can, up to the limits where the legislation says we can't do more. But we push as far as we can in terms of what can be shared because these are public, transparent processes. Is that a fair summary?
Thank you for that question, through the chair. That's correct. So be transparent as much as we can, but be very mindful. And it's very risky for me to just say yes, because there are so many exceptions to the act. Sometimes we can easily miss an exception. And then further that can result in an action from OIPC or a public complaint. So yes, for sure, there are guidelines to be as transparent as possible, but it's then if we are sharing information, then we need to be very mindful of the exceptions under the legislation.
I'd also like to add that the requirement to do a PIA is relatively new, and we likely have some holdover processes at the district that were in place before a PIA was required. So, for example, the engagement meetings that planning holds, when they change that process, that process will be required to go through a PIA. How it's established now, it was likely in place before the legislation changed. So wasn't subjected to the same level of scrutiny around that. So there would be changes coming through that process.
Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. Looking at Schedule A, and there's a long list of delivery medium, I'll call it. Floppy disks, $2 a disc, CDs and DVDs, recordable or rewritable, $4 per disc, computer tapes, microfiche, photographs, color, black or white, photographic print of textual graphic or cartographic record, black and white, dot matrix, inkjet, laser print, or photocopy, black and white. So this has me wondering, if we reflect back over the last 2 years, have we delivered for any applicant data on a floppy disk or an audio cassette? Like I'm thinking email has got to be the primary way we're delivering this stuff now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Thank you for that question through the chair. So if I consider the requests received in last 2 years, our most common mode of sharing information is through an email. If the material is large, then we can do like an online link to another drive, maybe on a data stick. We often, if the applicant is looking for paper copies, we print paper copies for them, but never on a floppy disk.
Can I add that that schedule is specified in the legislation, so the district can't change it. So those are established at the provincial level. So I realize how archaic it seems, but we don't have any control over that as a body.
Okay, great. Blame the province. Okay, I have one more question. The definition for applicant is pretty clear, and the definition for commercial applicant is pretty clear. Neither singles out journalist. So am I correct in going with the assumption that submission from a journalist would fall under the category of commercial?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, that's right.
Okay, yeah, so that has me just thinking now, is there potentially the flexibility to create a journalist category as another form of applicant and treat journalists in some way that is different from commercial and also different from applicant? Or are there provincial restrictions that would prevent that?
Thank you for your question through the chair. The legislation clearly categorize applicants as an applicant or as a commercial applicant. But as I discussed earlier, we try to be very consistent with our practices, but we do provide an opportunity for applying for exemption to the fee if the matter is of all the considerations listed in the legislation. So that can be a matter of public interest, public safety, or if they have if they have very low income and the information is of great significance to them. These are some categories listed under the legislation. So we do communicate these considerations or these options to the applicant when we provide them information about the possible fee for the FOI request.
Okay, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. So on my own, I'll come back to you, Councillor. The last couple questions here have got me thinking about what of this is do we have discretion in? I see that we have and I thought it was great the way it was presented. This is the ministerial direction, and this is what we're doing. I'm struggling to see where we have a lot of discretion here, right down to those fees coming from right from the legislation itself. It was a bit of a time machine reading that particular piece. But is there anything here where we, I think in some ways, there is obviously a tension between the freedom of information being as transparent as possible and being appropriate, taking appropriate actions with in regards to privacy. I can see that there's tension there. What discussion do we have in this? I appreciate the track changes and so on, but I'm just sort of can't parse that out. Is there any particular piece that I'm sure there's various levels of discretion used, but at the same time, it's not jumping out at me where we may have room to go a little more one way than the other, if any.
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, there is not much room for discretion here because it's a legislated requirement, and we are strictly following the legislation. Do what the legislation asks, follow the guidelines, follow the best practices. So there is not a lot that we can do based on our choices, but we have to follow the legislation. So does that answer your question?
Oh, sorry, Councilor Peniel.
Yeah, just in the response to Councillor French's last question, there was a reference to we might have some ability to, there's exceptions in the legislation where we can sort of adjust the rates or sort of consider that. And there's a mention of public safety, for example. If that was an issue, why wouldn't we be, I think a reasonable question for the folks, why wouldn't we be proactively releasing that? If we had this thing, there was a public safety interest, why would a FOIPA request be required versus just proactively?
Thank you for that question through the chair. So there are two different things that we consider for this. So district has, and most public bodies have that list. There is a routinely releasable list. So that list is audited on regular basis. And we use that list, which clearly outlines forms, records that can be routinely released. So that's totally admin process. And even if we make information in regards to public safety public, we still apply the exceptions to the legislation. We make sure that we apply all the legislations, and if we are not sure, we seek legal advice or we reach out to OIPC to understand the section if we need any further clarity. So even if we just make information public or release it in response to the FOI request, we still do our due diligence to make sure that we have applied all the exceptions of the legislation. Yeah.
I think on top of that, the requests that come in, we're not always sure of the scope of them. So we try as often as possible to make documents as accessible. So for example, we have a project on the go of making sure all of our minutes are digitized from dating back quite far to make sure they're all available. When it comes to specific documents, there's a lot of staff capacity required to review each document, make sure it actually fits within FOIPA or is on the routinely releasable list. And then we need a area to make it transparent. So we can definitely, if that's council's wish, we could look at a project of increasing the amount of information we're making public. But from a capacity perspective, we don't have a lot of extra capacity to start just rolling documents out without a thorough review.
So then if I can just say there's a hypothetical document, there's a public safety interest in it, but also releasing it would just necessitate revealing private information. And so in the context of a FOIPA request, it gives us sort of the mandate and the so on to really focus, talk to the privacy commissioner and say like, hey, what do we do here? Whereas it's much more challenging in the absence of a direct FOIPA request to sort of go through documents that have personally identifying info that we aren't typically allowed to release. There is a public safety piece. We don't have the capacity at this point to proactively take every one of those to the privacy commissioner. And that's why some of these might require a FOIPA to get them out if that's where the balance is they should go. Is that accurate?
Mostly, not necessarily. We don't necessarily have to go to the OIPC for everything. It's only if there's a question, but it still is a lot of staff time to review and redact and to process documents appropriately. An example that was pretty recent was the chief article about the pool and the number of staff emails that were associated with that FOI request that was to VCH. So that was a matter of public interest, but the potential impact of just making that information public without doing a thorough analysis based off of FOIPA and privacy, we wouldn't be able to just make that public. Does that kind of clarify that for you? There was still a lot of sensitive information in there that needed to be analyzed.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. On that, I noted when I read that article that the Freedom of Information request that it appeared as if the chief had used was their Freedom of Information request from VCH, not from us. Do you have any sense for why they might have used the Freedom of Information request to VCH and not us, and whether there was a price difference in those Freedom of Information requests?
Thank you for that question. I'm very sure there was no price difference because they were commercial applicants, and it's almost our prices, the cost that we have associated, we have listed in a fees and charges bylaw. It's almost like similar to rest of the industry. The reason why they quoted VCH was because these were VCH records. So they could have submitted the request to us. We could have only provided information or included information in the response package that district owned. So only emails that district had. And another, we were consulted for those records. So that always happens. So if, say, we receive a request and there is a third party who has either created those records or have stake in those records, we do consult with them. So they've just submitted it with BCH. That was the whole reason. Make sense?
Okay, and so one of the things I'm still trying to rationalize here, the fees are outlined in the legislation, but the fees that are outlined are per quarter hour of time. The estimate of how much time comes from the district, right? Or whoever's assessing the request. And so I had a member of the public had done a FOIPA request, and the response was $1,500 for the request. And if I go through, that's 50 hours. If I just use the fees and charges from the commercial application, which is 50 hours, or is that a normal sort of level of staff time required for a FOIPA request?
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, no, it's not that common. And whenever staff provide us, so to provide further information how we charge fee, once we receive the request, we reach out to staff to request for records. And we also inform staff that if they think it will take them more than 3 hours, they should get in touch with us to estimate the fee. So then further staff is directed on to provide a fee estimate based on information discovery. So discovering the information, extracting the information, and providing the information. And we also ask them to be very particular of how they track their time, and say and we also try and examine if the time estimate is consistent among all staff members. And then say if someone is quoting way more than other staff members, then we ask them to clarify, because staff should be able to, if asked, staff should be able to clarify why they estimated that time. So we are regularly in touch with staff during the process of the FOI request to make sure that they code the time estimate correctly.
And in this time estimation, is the role of the employee ever considered? For example, there are employees who are paid more, employees whose hourly time is less. Is that ever a consideration in how much the FOIPA request comes out to be?
Thank you for that question, through the chair. So as I said, first 3 hours are free for the FOI request. It has been our consistent practice where we consider first 3 hours for the highest paid employees so that the applicant doesn't have to pay significant amount of money for requesting access to the information.
Okay, so so an applicant, we use the highest paid employee that's, oh, I'll let you, that's okay. I'll let you converse, no problem.
We would just like to clarify when it's the applicant, so regular applicant who's not a commercial applicant, we charge the set fee that's outlined in Schedule A of the FOI bylaw. It's only in case of the commercial applicant that we charge the actual staff time,
Staff rate.
actual staff rate. So
Sorry, Schedule A
yes.
describes the price per quarter hour.
Yes, yes.
So we charge the actual staff rate or the Schedule A rate?
For the applicant, we charge $7.50 per 15 minutes of staff time. And for commercial applicants, we charge the actual staff rate.
From the fees and charges bylaw. So there's Schedule A that's applicable to applicants who are not commercial. And that's where the $7.50 comes into play. For commercial applicants, all fees are associated with our fees and charges bylaw. And that in that bylaw, it's dictated that it's at cost. So the cost of that staff time is included in the estimate. So 2 very different types of requests.
Okay, and can you point me to where in the fees and charges bylaw it stipulates that? I had a quick peruse through it and I couldn't find it. Thanks.
Councillor Pettingill, I'll let you hazard a question here to see if it's answerable while they're also hunting for where it is in the fees and charges, but go ahead.
I think just one clarifying question about my understanding of the process. Just in the context, I think it's useful to ask in the other questions we've been hearing. I don't know. I think about your office as in some ways an arm's length office where if a request comes in, my experience as a counselor, I get told what information I need to provide. I'm asked for an estimate. I'm not told who is asking and so on. And is that the sort of the practice throughout? And so when there's a request, whether it's staff or you mentioned some conversation back and forth with staff about estimating and so on, it's always only your office that knows who's making the request, and the rest of us, we're just tasked with providing an estimate and the information.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, we always keep that information confidential. Say if we need to disclose the information just to request the information, we are again very careful with what information we share. And if the applicant choose to reach out to the department directly, then it's totally their choice. But we do our due diligence and make sure we keep information of the FOI applicant confidential. Commercial or regular, we keep the information confidential. Sure. Yeah.
And I believe the schedule we're looking for is Schedule 1 of the fees and charges bylaw, which is on page 9 of said bylaw. Kind of under documents. That's my best guess. We'll see if there's another that might address your question, Councillor Hamilton.
Through the chair, in regards to the question related to the staff time, the rate that we charge, we currently have a rate listed for routinely releasable records, but there is an update coming to the fees and charges bylaw, And we will make sure that we clarify in the fees and charges bylaw, the rate that we charge for staff time.
Sorry, so are we able to consider this bylaw without the update to the fees and charges? Because this tells us that the fees are in the fees and charges, but they're not. Because we require an update.
Through the chair, so the direction in the legislation is to charge actual staff time, the actual cost to the public body.
But our update to the bylaw is going to be pointing to our fees and charges bylaw, which doesn't have the information until we update it.
That was my bad. I was forward thinking the amendment that's coming to our fees and charges bylaw. So yes, it's in the legislation that it's at staff, the actual staff rate. For commercial applicants, we have a fees and charges bylaw coming October 16th. That's going to repeal our fees and charges bylaw. And we've included that information in the proposed amendment coming so that it's clarified.
So in the gap between this our current fees and charges bylaw would apply, and is what the practice thus far has been aligned with this fees and charges bylaw?
Our practice thus far has been aligned with the legislation.
With the provincial legislation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to modify multiple pieces in our system to be fully compliant, this being one of the pieces. And really, we couldn't do the fees and I guess like they're both carts and horses in this scenario where it could happen in either order, but they both need to happen.
Yes, that's correct.
I'll say that the bylaw there isn't a misalignment there, it's just silent. So similar to our procedure bylaw, if our procedure bylaw doesn't speak to what we need, we go with the legislation. It always trumps bylaws.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I suppose the language, but the discussion around the specific language with commercial applicant and what fees would be associated with and cost of time and so on is best. That's really, will be best equipped to address that when we contemplate that fees and charges update.
I think that will be a great practice if we consider that when we are considering the fees and charges bylaw.
Okay. Highlights more work to do. It feels like most things here, it's a bit of an onion that we're peeling back, but I'm glad we have that understanding now. Councillor Anderson.
Excuse me, these information products that the staff have produced seem to me to be very high standard. They're a good read. And I wonder whether there may be a complementary orientation that isn't quite specifically concerning privacy, as we've been discussing today, but does concern the implications of the Freedom of Information Act for public officials, staff, and elected. The FOIPA also requires the district to ensure that the public has access to district records. This also affects this, it has implications for the standard of our conduct in conversations and communications and what is going to be accessible to the public. And to explain myself here, my experience with the Freedom of Information Act is that it is very robust. And it's important orientation for counselors, for certainly my experience, but also perhaps for new staff, that we be aware of this. Two instances that come to mind for me are land use issues. Upper Malcolm Blind Channel, the spit removal, where freedom of information applications have been made and the results have been distributed widely to hundreds, even more than hundreds of local people are aware of conversations and correspondence of federal and/or provincial and district staff members. This may not be an issue of privacy for those persons named, but it does have implications. And it has implications perhaps for the orientation of our staff that we are aware of this access and what that may mean. So I guess what I'm asking is whether there is a complementary information that would be desirable to explain the the basic implications for new councillors, new elected people, new staff persons about what that access, what that means, what it means for our need for high standard, responsible communications, business-like communications as public officials. Do you see, have you looked toward revising or addressing the need for this standard of orientation on that other related issue of the standard of our communications, not necessarily the privacy aspects, but the high standard we need to uphold given that access that the public will have and the distribution implications that may arise? Sorry about my wordiness, but perhaps I hope that might be clear, my inquiry.
Thank you for your question through the chair. As I said earlier, we regularly audit all our processes and procedures, and we keep on upgrading our trainings. So we definitely do that for new council. We do orientation, and it's very customized for council and for elected staff. So they're aware what are the best practices for communication, and our communication department does conduct a separate training orientation session in regards to what we have done currently. So once you access the mandatory privacy training that's available on Council Learning and Development page, it's very interactive in nature, the training itself, and it's very detailed. And there are 3 different modules. So there is a separate module for privacy and does talk about communication, what can be the consequences. But yeah, we continually audit and try and improve our training practices for sure. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. I guess I'll just, I can pass on a warning that it seems that, or I attest an assumption that the applicant really does not have any responsibility to constrain distribution of the information. It can go very widely indeed, and including to publications, media. But that is my assumption. There are no restrictions.
You're very correct on that. Through the chair, once information is sent out to the FOI applicant, we have no control over how information will be further used. And the regular applicants do not fall under any privacy legislation, whereas commercial applicants do fall under PIPA, which is protection of personal information. But it's a different legislation. So unfortunately, we don't have control over how that information is further used. That's why we always double, triple check to make sure that we have applied all the exceptions of the legislation properly. And yeah, and we do consult OIPC on regular basis to understand what the legislation means, what certain sections means. They cannot provide us with direction on what to redact, what not to redact, but they're very helpful when questions are asked regarding how different sections of the legislation applies. So that's very helpful from time to time. Yeah.
Thank you. So I feel like we've run through our questions here. My final question to try to wrap this up is that I haven't heard we've heard this on a lot of discretion. So as much as your alternative recommendation in the report was to provide feedback, I haven't heard room to do so, nor really anything that fit that category. Is there any particular reason? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, we always welcome council's feedback. If you do go through the training sessions and you notice things that could be improved or areas, like we're very receptive to feedback in those areas as well. So
I wasn't to make a comment on that part. It's more about so my question is going to readings. So the recommendation is to bring this forward on the 16th. We're in a special meeting now. We have the bylaw here. We have the ability to provide readings in special meetings, from what I understand. Is that you're nodding in agreement. Could we not give these, if we saw fit, could we not give this 3 readings now?
Absolutely, you have that discretion in a special.
Okay, so council, we've got maybe a third, we've got the recommendation, we've got the provided alternate, and the next alternate would be to provide readings, receive and provide readings now. So I just want to go around the table and sort of see where we're at. Councillor Hamilton?
I would like to see additional clarity on how fees are charged and where they are directing people to understanding how much they might expect to pay. My genuine concern here is that this tool, not by us, not by the people at this table, but this tool could, in certain circumstances, be used as a mechanism to reduce particular pieces of information that somebody might find embarrassing or something, right? And if we have that power to charge 50 hours of staff time for a freedom of information request that really doesn't take 50 hours, like, we need a protection so that nobody can do that in the future, right? We need to put those protections in our bylaw, and I'd like to see a clearer mechanism of that protection. I do recognize Councillor Pettingill's point that it's also possible for people to abuse the freedom of information requests to tie up staff time. So it's finding that balance. But I believe we can do better, because it's not clear to me how somebody can look at this and reasonably assess how much their request might cost.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, just some clarification from my colleague, because, I know some requests that come in, they come into us, and I've had a request for, I want this in, staff said they need this info and ask for an estimate. I know personally we have different processes, whether stuff is electronic, whether people take handwritten notes, which will significantly impact and provide some variation. So for me, it does really seem like it's going to be an individualized, like the estimate is going to be very particular, as opposed to, is the ask for some sort of appeals process, or like, what is the sort of ask here?
Go ahead.
So, for example, it's not clear to me within our own existing bylaws whether we should be charging for staff time or $30 per hour. Our practice is to go to the legislation, but we have $30 per hour listed in Schedule 1 of our fees and charges bylaw. So I just want absolute clarity in our bylaw as to what, and I don't mean the total cost, I mean, how much are we charging per hour? Are we charging based on actual staff cost? Are we charging per hour? That needs to be totally clear.
So with that in mind, I'm trying to think of a course of action here. I understand it, and the concern earlier, I was thinking that, we've heard that the fees and charges bylaw is coming and these things mesh together. This just references the fees and charges bylaw, so we can have that conversation separately. You could say it could be a motion for them to come together so we can see how they interact. The fees and charges bylaw likely touches 100 things, so there could be some challenges with that, because we have, so is that the type of thing you're thinking? Because I think there's 2 pieces. One was how much and dollar wise. Another one was that estimation of time. And I think they're obviously related. One multiplies the other, but I want to make sure we're getting at where you need to be.
The estimation of time, that is not something we can put in our bylaw. That is going to vary based on what records it is, right? But whether a really important piece to me is whether we're charging the $30 per hour as per the legislation, or we're charging actual staff time, because our highest paid staff members are considerably more than $30 an hour. And that can have a significant impact on an applicant or a commercial applicant. We just need to be crystal clear on what we're charging there.
Okay, I think I have a path forward for us on this. Go ahead.
So unless I misunderstood something, we are already, we have our bases covered where we have an actual $7.50 per quarter hour, which is $30 an hour for personal, and that's explicit. We speak about for commercial applicants going to our fees and charges, which is silent, which by sort of legal practice falls to the provincial. And so there's no conflict or contradictory. There's the personal rate, which are explicit on, the commercial, which we follow the provincial legislation. We may make it in a future update of the fees and charges explicit and duplicate the provincial for the commercial. But even without that, the way the law is, that's sort of a known. So we aren't sort of saying $30 an hour, but charging something different. The $30 an hour is what it is for individuals. The commercial is the provincial legislation, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to go to our staff for
Sorry,
comment.
just point of clarity. The wording that you're referring to in the Schedule 1, that talks about $30 per hour for routinely releasable records. So these are the records that do not require an FOI request, records which are public records. So it's different from, that fee is different from what we charge from FOI requests. So it's correct to say that currently our fees and charges bylaw is silent about fee that we charge for the commercial applicants. And it's correct to say that then we follow what's in the provincial legislation.
So I think, yeah, I'm just thinking of a path forward here. We could have it come back. We could provide some readings here, tie it to timeline. I do think that often when we make a change and we need to change the fees and charges bylaw to reflect that, those often happen shortly thereafter. So I'm seeing the importance of this piece, but I'm trying to think of readings here just says it references the fees and charges bylaw. So actually at this point, I'm going to try, I'll try a motion here to see if I can get us through this and see if we can resolve this. So I'm going to say, I'll move that we receive the privacy management program as presented at today's meeting for information. And then 2 would be to provide first 3 readings of the attached bylaw. And if there's a seconder, I'll speak to it. Councillor Anderson, thank you. So my first of all, the reason I'm moving this at this point is that I believe the bylaw itself is ready. We've explored it, and I've enjoyed our conversation here doing that. There's not a lot of room for discretion here. I think this is an important step, and we can move this forward. The next step, which is an important step, is the alignment of our fees and charges bylaw, making sure we have that correct, so that when someone reads this and references it, we can move forward. So I think that it's appropriate to give this 3 readings now. I don't think it's worth coming back in the substantively same form at a future meeting to have the discussion that we've had already. So for efficiency of time, we can do that. It's 3 readings. It hasn't been adopted. And when the fees and charges bylaw comes, I know that we'll be paying particular attention to this piece, and we can explore further how it relates to provincial legislation and how we represent this in our fees and charges bylaw. We will have and we may not even have the gap between, we were talking carts and horses earlier, which one goes first, because we haven't yet adopted this bylaw. So we are, I think that the appropriate place for discussing those fees, which are important, are in the fees and charges update, and that might be important that happens prior to this coming back for adoption. But I'll leave that to staff to see what other steps need to happen as well, and we can work our way through these issues. So I'll be supporting this, and I encourage council to as well. And thank you, staff, for all the work, I guess, on this topic all the time that just happens. And as Councillor Pettingill says, I believe this is important, very important work that is really a hands-off piece, and I'm confident that we're doing the best high level work, sort of balancing all the requirements of the appropriate legislation. So thank you for the discussion today. Any other comments, Councillor French?
I have a question for you, Mayor. I'm not clear. Is your motion the staff recommendation, or is it's different? How?
It's to do the readings, not to bring them back in a future meeting. We're here in a special meeting today, 3 readings. So receive and provide the 3 readings. Any other comments, Councillor Hamilton?
I'd like to request severing items 1 and 2.
Sure, let's do that. We don't need to vote on severing the items, do we?
No, as long as you vote on them in the order they're
Okay.
presented.
I'll just call a question on receipt. I believe that's not the contentious piece here. So on the first item, which is receiving, all in favor? Motion carries. My comments stand on both items. Would you like to make a comment on the second item?
Thanks. I think when it comes to readings, once we give 3 readings, the wording that has been put here stays. And I think there's an opportunity to clarify the way we've worded this, the way we've put this together. I'm hesitating. I'm stepping back from wordsmithing. Like, I can think of ways to do this, but I'm stepping back from it. I'm hoping staff can see the confusion that we've got Schedule A copied from from the provincial legislation into our bylaw, but then we refer to another bylaw that doesn't yet have the information in it. We can be clearer. We can be more consistent in our bylaws. It won't take much extra time, and we can come together and do all 3 readings on this and a little housekeeping on the fees and charges bylaw, I believe, with a lot less effort than giving 3 readings now and locking staff into the exact wording that is given here in this bylaw. That's why I will vote against giving 3 readings now.
So just in reply, I think the referring to the fees and charges bylaw is appropriate. That can evolve over time so that only one piece needs to move when it's time to move. I also would just point out that we're not adopting this here, so there won't be that that gap may not exist because it's coming within 30 days for the fees and charges piece, and so I think we have my motion sort of is taking that into mind that way. And a alternate path might be to provide less than 3 readings and to provide that and some guidance that it comes back. And if you want to, that could be an amendment that that gets us there. I just want to start from I'd like to advance this as far as we can. And if 3 readings is too far, then I'm open to a suggestion, but I don't think it needs to come to a future meeting for all the readings.
Oh, okay. I would say an alternate path could be the staff recommendation, which is they ask for feedback. And I think my effort here, my intent here is to provide you feedback on ways that I think we can help clarify our bylaw. And they can come back for 3 readings on September 16th. I don't see the reason to push it forward and lock staff in. But anyways, we can have this motion, and then subsequently, if this fails, I suppose we can direct staff.
Okay. Do you have, is that a hand, or are you just?
Just a reminder, if it fails, it kills the bylaw.
Okay. Any other comments on this, Council? Councilor Pettingill?
Yeah, I think given where we are and what we just heard, I'm inclined to support this. I would sort of suggest, and I understand when you're reading through a bylaw, it's nice not to have to refer to the provincial bylaw to see what the actual numbers are. But on the flip side, that means every time the province does something, then we've got to, and so I have some actually, and I think maybe my database normalization mind wants to not reference, and I would pull out the provincial references or explicit references and what's here. But, you know, I guess given where we are, maybe that's direction to consider for future bylaws, and this can be an incremental thing that we improve, and maybe we don't deal with it right here on this one. And so I think I'm more inclined to support this time.
Okay, any other comments? Yeah, I'll
So, like, if this gets voted down, I don't know how we continue forward without this bylaw, or the changes to the bylaw don't go forward, right? Is that?
Correct. The current FOI bylaw will remain the same, and I need to look at the legislation to see what I think it's a 6-month timeline, and then we could bring back a new bylaw if it fails, this amendment.
So I'd like to amend Mayor Herford's motion to go back to the staff recommendation, which is to direct staff to include the District of Squamish Freedom of Information Protection Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw, blah, 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 on a subsequent regular business meeting agenda for consideration of first 3 readings following consideration of council comments at today's meeting.
Just as a point of clarity here, this isn't modifying my original motion was 3 readings. This is what I just heard was it feels larger than an amendment. An amendment generally in my mind would be less readings, go to first reading, second reading, something along those lines. Can you speak to just this point before I look for a seconder?
I think that's up to council's discretion. If you would like to receive it as an amendment, there are 2 other options. You could give the bylaw first, you could amend the bylaw to give it first 2 readings, and then we'd come back for 3rd reading, or you could discuss a motion to withdraw the motion that's currently on the table.
I think, okay, this feels more substantial. Just when I think about our regular practice, this feels more substantial than a normal amendment. So, but if there's a seconder, we can debate that point. Seeing, yeah, Councilor Prendergast.
Is there a reason, to my colleague, why there wouldn't be a proposal to just give this first or second reading and come back for subsequent readings with some of the changes you had, or is there a reason why you've attempted?
Because this was the original staff recommendation. It seems like the path forward. We sometimes try to do things on the fly. Staff have asked us. This was staff's plan. This is what they wanted. I think we've provided feedback, and that's why I went sort of back to the staff recommendation. I just removed the explicit date of September 16th so that staff could have whatever time they needed to address the comments.
I'll second the amendment.
Sorry, I'm just going to, this is a pure process question, is that now that this amendment's been seconded, this feels more substantial than an amendment to me, and is a new, I think, represents a new motion. And I don't necessarily want to die on this hill on this topic, but as a process in this room, I want to make sure I understand it. And I think I see alternate path through here, but.
We deal with some pretty large amendments occasionally. You deal with some pretty large amendments occasionally. I don't think this is necessarily out of line, but once again, I do think that it is council's discretion if you as a body feel that it is too large to incorporate into an amendment.
So I think just for me, this is larger than an amendment and is essentially taking let's provide 3 readings and turning it into a refer back to staff with comments. That's a massive departure. I think an alternate way through this is to provide the feedback. The feedback that I've heard is actually in relation to a different but adjacent bylaw, and maybe they should come together. We could signal to staff that the work substantively is done on this bylaw, and we need to figure out that one point of how they mesh with the future bylaw. I think that could be done through reducing the number of readings from 3-2 with that feedback, and then staff know where to focus their energy, and we can have that piece of the conversation that we need to have at that point in time. I also feel that that was implicit in my initial motion because we're not moving to adoption. And I think by adoption, I'd like to see those things come together, and we've signaled that through our conversation here today. So I'm not going to be proposing an amendment, but this is too far, and I think sets a bit of actually a dangerous practice for us to take things from we're going to go to 3 readings to effectively refer it back to staff with comments through an amendment. That we're talking about 2 completely different courses of action. So I'll be voting against this amendment. I think this is how we resolve this amendment piece. But I'll go to the, sorry, I jumped the queue. I'll go to the mover on this.
I feel like we're quibbling about process here as opposed to getting to a resolution. So a question of process, once an amendment has been seconded, may the amender pull the amendment off the table? Retract the amendment.
Could I have 2 minutes with the procedure bylaw quickly?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We do, just as a comment there, we do have the ability, if you speak to as to why we should do that, even if we're not allowed to, we could vote the amendment down and go back to where we started and try a different one. We always have that route. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, just in the interest of moving things along, I do feel on this particular topic, it's maybe not the biggest one to sort of worry about the specifics of an amendment versus a new motion. I do feel that this is a step too far in terms of an amendment. What would qualify as an amendment, and I'm worried about what precedent that might send for more sort of other discussions. My inclination, given the discussion, would be to vote this down, and then I would even consider moving first or second reading. I don't think third reading gives us the room to address the changes. So I would prefer that we just vote this down, and then I'd be happy to move first reading or first and second.
Okay, I'm going to go back to staff for the answer there. And I know we have a path through this regardless of the answer, but let's figure out which path is most appropriate. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to start with amendments generally. So this is what our procedures bylaw says about amendments. A member may, without notice, move to amend a motion that is being considered at a council meeting. An amendment may propose removing, substituting for, or adding to the wording of an original motion. So in this case, there was an amendment that proposed removing council considering first 3 readings and replacing with that it comes back at a future council meeting date. So technically, it does fit the parameters of the procedure bylaw. A proposed amendment must be voted on before the main motion. We know that. Okay, so we know the rest of that. So if council has a couple options now. So you can vote on the amendment as it's presented, or you have the option in the procedure bylaw to withdraw the motion. And so there needs to be council majority to withdraw the motion. And so we would treat it like a separate motion if council would like to withdraw the amendment. And then we would do the same thing for the main motion if council feels they would feel like to withdraw the motion. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think so. So in this case, what we'd like to do, I've heard that Councillor Hamilton was entertaining withdrawing.
I am happy to withdraw the motion. I don't need to be in a procedural.
No,
battle
I'm not,
about
and
this.
I'm not.
We just need to move forward in a
Yeah.
way that staff can address the concerns.
Yeah, that's fine. So, and does it need to be, and the mover can just do that, or does it need to be consented? This is also a learning opportunity. It's not necessarily getting tied up on this particular topic, but.
We don't do these often, so I think just for consistency's purposes, let's treat it like a motion. So if we've got a mover, if there's a seconder, then.
Is that okay with
we
the
vote on
seconder?
it.
Okay, thank you. So we're back to the main motion. Councillor Pettigrew, were you interested in amending the main motion?
So I think we have to vote on the withdrawal.
Oh, we have to vote on the withdrawal. Thank you. I'll call the question on the withdrawal. All in favor? Motion carries. Interesting how we could have voted down and not, anyways, it's okay. There's a process through this. Okay, so now we're back to the main motion. Thank you. If anyone would like to amend the main motion or make an attempt to do so, this would be the opportunity. Councillor Peniel.
Yeah, I'd like to amend the motion on the floor to only grant first reading with feedback as provided by council, and leave that space to my colleagues to do that before we vote on this. And I would speak to that if seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. I just want to caution council on the on sort of providing the feedback in comments. If we want to focus this on a particular subject, I think we'd be best to make another subsequent amendment to this that captures that, so we're not going around on pulling from everyone's individual comments, and then what we get back meets our expectations both in content and timeline. But I think we can deal with that in a subsequent amendment. Does that make sense? Yeah. Anyone want to speak to the amendment? Second by Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, and just the reason why I said first, I understand when it comes back, we can actually give it all three or whatever we want. I just said first right now, it seems to give us the most room to adjust. So it's most flexibility, but I think the hope would be that this would be addressed and we sort of take it as far as we can the next time we touch this.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Hamilton, do you want to, or sorry, I thought I saw your hand.
Yeah, so you're looking for, because we need to put the amendments forward before you call the question.
I think what we should do here is this is amending it to first reading. And then once we've done that, I think we would be well served to have an additional amendment that just says what it is that we want and when we want it.
Great.
But we can do that as two different pieces, because right now we're debating 3 readings or 1 with comments of some sort. Okay. So any other, I'll be supporting this motion. This was an attempt to save us some. My original motion was an attempt to move this forward and save us, be efficient with our time, which ended up being a little challenging inside the context of this meeting. But I will be supporting this. I do think that the area that we want to see change, and I've heard one area I think we need to clearly articulate, and when we vote on this. So I'll call the question. All in favor on the amendment? Motion carries. So now I'd like to propose an amendment to the amended motion that speaks to the additional clarity direct staff to provide additional clarity in relation to the fees associated with this work and how that relates to provincial regulation and our fees and charges bylaw prior to consideration of future readings. And if that's seconded by Councillor Hamilton, on this piece, go ahead.
Yeah, so I hate doing this, but I heard two, I think there's 2 paths we could take for clarity. One is we sort of duplicate what the provincial legislation says in all of our bylaws and make it very explicit and duplicate in ours. The other path is to change our bylaws not to reference the provincial legislation other than to say, go see the provincial legislation for the actual numbers and pull out some of what we've added in. And so either one of those could offer more clarity, but they're different paths. And so I think we should clarify which path we're hoping staff to take.
I'm personally agnostic to path, but I do think it's worth considering them, if not together, in close proximity. So I'll go to Councillor.
A third option could be putting everything into the fees and charges, including those things copied from the provincial legislation, so that the user can go and see all of them. However, this is a point where I don't think that we should be directing staff that specifically, because I'm sure staff know a lot more about, I'm sure there's a lot of ins and outs about positives and negatives of these options. So I would prefer to leave it a little bit more open-ended and allow staff to, if they want, maybe perhaps give an opportunity later after this motion, if they do need any clarity on staff's direction on this point, to give it.
Okay, any other discussion on this point? So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, now we're back to the main motion, twice or thrice amended. But reading with one reading with the feedback. I don't see any hands for any other comments, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for your work on this and working through that process with us. Now I'd be looking for a motion to terminate. Or
Before that, may
or-
I ask staff, do you need any further clarity on the motion or the direction from staff or the direction from council or the intent of council regarding these bylaws?
But I just do a summary and make sure that I understand it correctly. Okay, so we're going to take this bylaw away and we're going to make sure that our fees and charges aligns with the FOI bylaw amendment that's being proposed. And we'll make sure that they travel in conjunction to council, so there's overlap there. And when we do that, we'll provide clarity on where it's spelled out in provincial legislation and to who, and where it's spelled out in the fees and charges bylaw and to which style of applicant. Is that, yeah,
that matches my understanding was as we debated that,
great.
as mind bending as that was. So I'm going to move that we terminate this meeting because you got a bonus one in there. I'll give you a seconder, Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you for working through that, everybody. We'll see you back at 6 o'clock for the main event.